So the watch I'm going to be working on today is an 18 size Elgin, and it was sold by Ross Labrie out of Macon, Missouri. He was a jeweler there in the early 1900s. Well, let's open it up and see what it looks like. So this watch belongs to Floyd and it's been in the family for many years. He received it from his father. We're just going to open it up and see what it needs. It's been many years since it's been serviced, and right off I can see the bow doesn't really belong there. It's all bent up. You can't even hardly get it past the crown. Which, as you can see, it's just cut off there with some wire nippers there, and it's got a little bit of a nib there, but it's all bent up. Find a replacement for that. And the name on the face of it is a Ross Labrie, Macon, Missouri. Now Ross was a local jeweler there. He had a shop in the early 1900s, and this particular watch, it's an Elgin 336. Nice movement on the balance wheel. Elgin would, upon request, make dials for the different jewelers around the country, and Ross Labrie was just a jeweler that paid Elgin to put his name on the dial here. But we'll pull this apart and get it cleaned up, and first thing I like to do is get that balance out of there so it doesn't get damaged. Balance out of there. Now with that balance out of there, I can go ahead and remove the hands. Bezel, there we go, comes off. To remove the hands, we have a hand puller. I'll put this in here to protect the porcelain dial. It's just a little tool that works. And there's the hands removed. Now we can pull the movement out. In order to do that, we need to loosen the fastening screws. And then it has a dust cover on the side here. This little brass piece right there. We'll just get the screwdriver in here and nudge it up a little bit. And I prefer to use these brass screwdrivers wherever I can, because as you can see on the side here, there's a lot of scratches in here from somebody using high carbon steel screwdrivers. They scratch a lot. So this is the dust cover. Now we'll remove the dial. It's held in there by 3 screws. Now the dial should lift right off of there. It's a porcelain dial. It's a double sunk dial, which means that this has a lowered area right through here, and then this piece here is also lowered down. This second hand track is actually a separate piece. You can see it soldered in there. The dial washer. That dial washer just puts a little friction against this hour wheel here, because you can see it's free floating and it just gets a small amount of friction to hold it down where it should be. So as I'm pulling this apart, you can see on this paper here, there's already a bunch of dirt and gunk there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a lot of black particles in here, probably just little specks of dirt and dust. Put some watch paper up here, and there's some of that dirt that's coming out of it. You can see them on that white paper. So there's definitely a little bit of dirt in here. First thing we check for is if there's any damage to the jewels. Sometimes they'll get cracked, chipped from other repair people. They all look in good shape. They used sapphire and rubies in these movements for the jewels. And that has some dirt on it, I can see. Escape wheel. And this gear was put in upside down, so you can see the shoulder and the brass there is supposed to fit into that shoulder right there. And when I pulled it out, it was in this position. It should have been installed in that position, right there like that. And Floyd did mention that it wound really hard, and this is part of the winding mechanism, so that's probably was causing a lot of friction in there. So now with it disassembled, we'll run it through the cleaning machine and get it back together. Just placing all these parts in the cleaning basket, get it cleaned up. The smaller parts I'll put in here. So we'll put this in the cleaning machine and get it cleaned up. I've got the mainspring cleaned and oiled and back in its barrel. A little stronger tweezers here. Okay, that's ready to go in the watch. So I'm just finishing up here. Need to get this cannon pinion on, that's what they call it. I'll put a little bit of oil on the center wheel. Cannon pinion will slip on here. It'll snap on. There we go. And then this setting wheel will go here. And they don't take any oil. Our wheel goes here, but I'm going to leave it off until we get it running and get the regulated, because it's free floating here and it'll fall off while we're moving it around. And here's a bridge for the setting wheel. So I'm just finishing up the oiling on this watch. The pivot here for the mainspring needs a small amount. About ready to wind it up and put some power on the wheels and put the balance wheel in it. Looks like it's going to run okay. So I let the watch run overnight, and everything seems to be functioning on it. Another issue is when we snug this down against the balance bridge, it causes the balance wheel to stop. And at sometime in the past, what's going on here is somebody has replaced the balance staff jewel with a replacement jewel, and they didn't adjust it where it should have been. So when we snug this screw down where it should be, the balance jewel is causing friction on that balance wheel staff. So I'm going to go into this area here where the jewels are, and I'm going to adjust that jewel so that it gives that balance staff a little more freedom, or I may go ahead and replace it. So I ended up replacing that balance jewel. This is the original one that was in there. I don't think this was the correct one that was in there from the factory, because the adjustment on it was just not, I wasn't even able to tighten the screw completely on the balance bridge there to get the balance to run, because it was starting to have so much friction that the balance wheel was seizing up and slowing down. But with this replacement jewel in there, it's got real good motion now. And I'm going to go ahead and put it on the timing machine and see how it times out. So this is the pickup for the timing machine. It picks up the ticking and the talking of the watch. And this end here is where the stem goes in to wind, and that goes in this position. So we'll lay this in here, and that's called the pendant. Typically these Elgin 336 models would have been timed by the stars. Elgin built an observatory in their facility, and it was staffed full-time, and they would bring down what they would call a master watch, and they would time that watch with the stars. And then once that watch was timed, that watch was taken back into the factory where they were timing all of the watches. And so it was considered back then the state of the art to have these watches timed with the stars. This is the vibrograph, and it's an older model, but it has a quartz crystal in there, and so it's much more accurate than, you know, timing them with the stars. But we'll see how this times out. Right now it's at the pendant up. And then we go pendant right. And then pendant down. Pendant left. And we'll go pendant up again. And then we'll go dial up. And you may not be able to see it well, but it has made some lines on here. This first one, it's showing me it's about 2.5 minutes slow in 24 hours. And then these other ones, it's averaging about 30 seconds fast in 24 hours. Now let's pull this off of here. So to summarize what happened on the timing machine, I marked it here to make it a little easier to understand, but the pendant up shows about 30 seconds fast. Pendant to the right, about approximately 30 seconds slow. Pendant down about 30 seconds fast. Pendant left, about 30 seconds fast, and this is the in 24 hours. And then pendant up again, it shows 30 seconds fast in 24 hours. Now when I put the face up, and that would be the position it would be in overnight if somebody were to take it out of their pocket and put it on their nightstand, it's showing about well, it's more than 30 seconds slow in 24 hours. So this gives us a baseline to go off of, and I can go ahead and make some adjustments on there to correct that. This abrupt change here tells me that there's something going on with the balancing of the balance or the regulating pins on the hairspring. Now, to adjust the balancing of the balance, it'd take a couple hours. To adjust the regulator pins on the hairspring, it'd take about a couple minutes. So I'm going to go at making the adjustment on the hairspring, and then we'll put it on the timing machine and see how it times out again. So on that hairspring, there's two small pins called regulating pins that the hairspring touches every time the balance wheel changes its direction, and I'm going to reduce the distance between those pins. I can do that. The pins are a little bit tapered on the distance, so I'm going to lower this hairspring about maybe 1/1000th of an inch, and we'll see if that makes any difference in the direction we want to go. A little bit more in here. Okay, now I've lowered that hairspring. Well, I'm going to lower it just a tad bit more. Might be too much. Now I'm going to raise it. Okay, we'll put that on the timing machine again and see how it times out this time. So after adjusting the hairspring, moving it down about 1/1000th of an inch, this is where it made a big difference. Before the adjustment, pendant up was gaining about 30 seconds, and after the adjustment, pendant up was gaining, that's approximately 1 minute in 24 hours. And the face up is where I was trying to change the adjustment. Face up before the adjustment was losing approximately 30 seconds in 24 hours. After the adjustment, the face up is gaining about a minute in 24 hours, which is okay because if you look at all of the positions, they're all stable right now. So now that I have a good baseline on the timing machine, the watch is gaining approximately 1 minute in 24 hours in all positions. I know that everything within this balance area seems to be pretty good. And so now it's time to use the regulator, and these Elgin 336s came out with what they call a Charles S. Mosley regulator, and the regulator has a traveling nut on this curved threaded shaft in here. And by turning this nut, turning it right now, I don't know if you can see it, but I can bring it up here and show you, maybe get a little closer. But by turning this nut on here, it's going to take this rod here, which is the regulator, and it's going to move it back and forth. If I move the regulator rod in this direction, it's going to make the movement go faster, and if I move it in this direction, it's going to make it go slower. And what that traveling nut does is it controls the balance wheel's rate of oscillation. These Mosley regulators were patented in 1874. They work so well for Elgin that these 1910, 1911 models still use them. It's a very accurate way of adjusting them. So I'm going to move this over to the timing machine, and while I'm timing it, I'm going to be moving this nut back and forth, and that's going to change the rate of oscillation on that balance wheel. So here's the latest timing results on this watch, and I've drawn some lines in here to separate the positions. But this is pendant up, and you can see the line is a little bit fast. That's probably about 5 seconds in 24 hours. Pendant to the right, almost a straight line. Pendant down, losing about 5 seconds. This is pendant left, losing about 5, and then pendant up, gaining about 5, same as this pendant up right here, and then the line divides right here, and this is the dial up, and it's gaining about 5 seconds in 24 hours. So if you average these out on the plus or minus, it's pretty close to a straight line, and that's at a 3/4 winding on the thing. When you wind it up fully, it's going to gain slightly a little bit more, and then as the watch winds down at the end of the day, it'll most likely be going just slightly slower. But average, I think this pocket watch is probably going to average, it should average 5 to 10 seconds in 24 hours, and that's real good for a 100-plus-year-old Elgin. But we'll go ahead and put the dust cover back on the sides of it here, and get the dial on there and get it mounted in the case and go from there. So it's been approximately a week since I've had this on the timing machine and timed it, and right at the moment it's been keeping time within plus or minus about 3 seconds in 24 hours, and that's really good. But right now I'm going to work on the bow. I don't know if you remember the this bow that was on here, but it was just kind of mangled up, and it's too small, bent up. I don't know why anybody would have put that on there, except they didn't have anything else. But we'll see what I can find here in some of the stock I have. These bows come all different configurations. Of course, you can see this one here is just not going to do it. I've got some over here. This is some new old stock. These are probably close to 75 years old, so they're not brand new made. They were made back when these watches were new. So this one here looks like it's going to fit. It looks like it's the correct size. So first off, inside these pendants, this one here is tapered in there. Some of these pendants have a round hole cut in there, and this is not designed that way. So I need to fit this bow on here, and the first thing I'm going to do is shape the end of it so that it fits in there a lot snugger. Right now the end on this is it's square cut, and I'm going to taper it slightly so that it fits the taper that is in here, and I'm going to just go ahead and do that by hand. I'm going to hand shape it. So I'll do that, and then we'll get that fitted on the pendant. So I've got the bow ends tapered so that they fit inside the pendant nice and snug, and so we'll install the bow. And this just spreads it apart, and let go and it goes in. If we want that a little snugger, what we can use is some bow tightening pliers. That goes right on here, and then it you just squeeze a little bit and it'll tighten that bow up real nice. Yeah, that's much nice and snug now. So that was the last piece. The bow's on there nice and snug, and take one last look at it here. Nice 17 jewel Elgin National Watch Company. It's got a private label, Ross Larrabee, Macomb, Missouri.